Okay, we only have one bill on the calendar today. It's going to be House Bill 454 by Kevin Levettis. If you want to go ahead and present your bill. Another one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, House Bill 454, is the reason I'm carrying this bill is last year after we passed House Bill 336, it created the requirement that a first-time DUI offender get an assessment. DHR came to me offline during the summer and said that they needed to, that it would cost them approximately $500,000 to implement this program. And what this does, as drafted, is add $7 to the current fee that's charged for the DUI risk reduction program and changes it from 75 to 82. And this would be a revenue neutral way of raising the $500,000, and that is what this bill does. And the only, you'll see that the only changes is the word shall in place of must, and the line 20 puts in 82 instead of the current 75. And it's the same change on line 44. It's not an extra fee. The $82 that's charged, there is a administration fee that the school operators pay, and that would go straight from the straight over to I think it's who is it that DDS receives the money less? Is that right? And DDS gets that extra $7, so the school operators do not get any of that. That's it. Take any questions?
Hold just a second.
Except
Jill,
from the governor's floor leader.
On line 11, the must and shall, any big deal that shall is not underscored or anything since it's the new language? I thought I was going to give up picking up the first one.
Oh, my.
Okay, you do have some questions, so let's see. Said you, Matt?
I would just
Representative Ramsey.
I would just at the appropriate time like to be recognized for a motion.
Okay, we got a few speakers on the bill, but at that time we'll get you there. Thank you. Representative Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author, I'm not going to. I'm not sure if I'm prepared to offer this, but just as a recommendation, is there a, we're looking at increasing fees over time. Would you be willing to consider a possible language that would perhaps allow the department or otherwise to increase the fee at a 2.5% rate per year or 10% every 4 years, so that you keep up with over time? Or are we going to go? Are we going to be in a position where we're having to keep raising fees over time?
It's fine with me if we do that. In fact, my understanding is that there has not been in the last 7 or 8 years any increase for the DUI school operators. And one of the speakers I believe you'll hear will talk about the book fee has been the same since 1991, and we are far behind several states in that. So I would consider any of those friendly amendments. The core of the bill is to make sure that we raise the revenue necessary for DHR to implement 336, but beyond that, I'd be open to just about anything.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the author, I'm going to try to craft some language. Just consider that. If you have some recommendations, just be aware I may offer that as an amendment.
And I will not allow any subdermal chips to be implanted pursuant to this code section.
Representative Abrams.
This is more of a technical question either to the author or to Ms. Travis. Is there a prerequisite that they actually list the amount of fees in legislation? I mean, I've noticed that we do, sometimes we list the actual amount of the fee, and other times we simply list a formula for how a fee would be assessed. We'll say greater or less. Do you know whether it's simply a matter of we just choose and opt to do so? Okay. Okay. The secondary question I had, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. In fact, one of the things I was going to say is that, in fact, in talking to DDS and some of the school operators before that, and AD is the program that gets the money for the book fee. In fact, one of the suggestions is that we, in fact, don't statutorily increase the book fee. We allow that to go by rule, which is the way that is at least currently done.
Mm-hmm. And then my secondary question would be, why the increase in the assessment component but not the increase in the intervention component?
Again, this was a patch to get the $500,000 raised. I'm fine with any increases that the committee wants to add on to this.
All right, thank you.
Representative Knox.
I'm just curious why we're setting a fee on these at all. It seems to me if we're saying you must have these schools, private industry and citizens, you must go to these schools. I'm not sure why. How do we know it's $82 and instead of 156 or 12? Shouldn't that be a function of the businesses and what they need to do to attract people to their school instead of us doing it?
Well, again, there's not a matter of is that a question to me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, whoever.
Yeah. The answer is they don't have a choice. If they want their license reinstated, they have to go. Now, there is a non-compliance rate of, I don't know if it's 25, 35%, but again, that's somebody who is, for the second time, willfully violating the law. Again, what I do think is important is that we have at least for the purposes of what we're trying to do now, that we have a set fee that will raise the money necessary to provide DHR with the proper funds to effect 336. But beyond that, if we want to do this by rule, I don't know that I don't know whether or not DDS or DHR has a problem with that, and they are, I believe, at least DDS and maybe DHR signed up to speak. Maybe we could ask that question when they testify.
I don't want to turn this into a debate, but my point is that just because we say you have to do something doesn't mean that we can command somebody to do it for some price that it can't be done for. That's my point. If you can offer the service for $82, it's no harm, no foul, I guess. But the issue is whether or not, because we require this as a part of your license. You have to do this as a part of your license. We require other things that you have to do, you have to pass the test and so on and so forth to get your driver's license. So, and I'm not, and if the state was charging this fee, that's one thing. If we're willing to say we're going to run this school for $82 a month or whatever this fee is, that's okay. We could do that. We'll just take taxpayer money away from them and pay for it. But if we're going to put it in the private sector and say, no, we want y'all to run these schools, and we don't really care what it costs. We just don't want you to charge any more than this.
You know what? I'll be honest with you. I bet the DUI school operators would be delighted if we removed the restriction from them on what they can charge, because we are pretty far below, I believe, other states in what they charge. But keep in mind, there's a distinction between the administrative fees that are charged, the assessment fees of $82 versus the $190 that it costs to take the course. The $82 is a straight state assessment, some of which goes to DDS, and I'm not sure how it's farmed out from there. But the $82 is separate from the $190 charged for the actual course itself, and which is also separate from the $25, which goes to ADE, which does the assessments.
Would you entertain a motion to strike that portion of the line 20 at least that refers to the charge for the program part?
As long as we have, well, first of all, I would want to hear from the school operators, DHR, DDS, but as long as we have some method in the statute that allows them to charge for the school, because if we ask them, if there's nothing in the statute, I just wouldn't want to remove it and then make it impossible for them to set their own rate. So as long as we substitute with language that, at a rate to be determined by the fair market or free market, whatever you want to do, I don't have a problem with that. But again, I think we need to hear from the experts here who deal with this in the trenches before we would do anything like that.
Any other questions for the author? We got three speakers. Scott Dunbar, DHR. Just have a seat right there. If you could just pull the mic to you, please. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm Scott Dunbar. I'm the director of the DUI intervention program in the Department of Human Resources and in the addictive disease section. Our little unit deals with the clinical evaluators and treatment providers that provide services for DUI offenders. Previously, before House Bill 336, we only dealt with multiple offenders, so people that had 2 or more DUIs within 5 years. With the changes that were implemented from 336, now clinical evaluation is required of all DUI offenders, and the window of multiple offenders has opened from 5 years now to 10 years, and a felony provision for people that have had 4 DUIs within a 10-year period. So our administrative costs and needs, therefore, have gone up hugely because we're going to be dealing with all DUI offenders and not just the multiple offenders. The numbers of clinical evaluators around the state since House Bill 336 became law has increased also dramatically so that we're able to handle the numbers of clinical evaluations that need to be done. DHR is charged with setting the rules for that to determine the qualifications to be a clinical evaluator and to supervise and audit their work. And therefore we need an increase in fees to go from a staff of 3 people that handles the administrative overhead of about 5,000 cases to a larger staff to be able to handle 50,000 cases per year. And in order to raise this money, the proposal in this law is to raise the rebate fee, which has been in existence since 1990 and has been the method of raising the money to administer oversight for the DUI schools and the multiple offender program. And by raising the rebate fee from $15 to $22, that will produce adequate funds for both driver services to administer the oversight of the DUI schools and for the Department of Human Resources to administratively handle the oversight of clinical evaluation and treatment. The information sheet, the talking points, we've given you some background information in history and anticipated what some of your questions might be and given some specific, some examples and some comparison with costs of other states for providing the same services, and Georgia is one of the lower of our neighboring states.
Any questions for the speaker? We had one, but he's no. Seeing no questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chairman Knox may have a question when he gets back, but he's not in here right now. Barry Shrink from Taggart's. How you doing
Thank
this
you,
morning?
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Barry Schrank. I'm president of Taggart's Driving School. I'm also a member of the Georgia Association of Risk Reduction and Defense of Driving Educators, commonly referred to as GARD. And I unofficially represent ADE, which is the assessment provider, and also for PRI, which is the curriculum provider for the DUI risk reduction programs. I'm here to speak in support of House Bill 454, but also with some suggestions. And before I make those suggestions, I would like to address Chairman Knox's concern about the fees. I'm a free market person. I always have been in business. I don't believe that states should establish fees. However, in the case of certain areas such as driver's licenses, we don't negotiate the driver's license renewal fee when we go into the department. The fee is set by law. And it's the same thing with the DUI risk reduction program fees and the driver improvement fees. They have been set by law because individuals in most cases are required to take those courses. We in the industry have had a good relationship over the years, the last 20 or 25 years, with members of this committee and other committees in the General Assembly. and we've been able to bring information to them on a fairly regular basis every 3 or 4 years when our expenses have gone up. And the General Assembly has seen fit to increase those fees as we've lived with inflation like everyone else. So it really is a policy decision of what the committee wants to do. We don't have, as an industry, a problem with the fees being set in law, as long as we can still continue our good relationship, and when we need an increase, we can come back and be honest with you what our expenses are, present the information, and then get assistance from the legislature. In any event, with respect to Representative Levitas' bill, let me just give you a quick explanation of how the DUI program operates so you understand the fees. When someone gets a DUI or they're assigned by the court to attend a DUI risk reduction program, it could be because of domestic violence. It doesn't have anything to do with a driver's license. And the judge has decided the person needs, as part of the sentence, to attend a DUI risk reduction program because alcohol was involved or drugs were involved. That individual comes in, and the first thing they do is pay $75 to the school owner, and that's to pay for an assessment. That assessment consists of a little over 100 questions, and it basically asks questions about the individual's lifestyle and their use of alcohol and or drugs. It's an excellent assessment tool. As you can imagine, perhaps question 18 asks a certain question, and then question number 28 asks a similar question, and on and on and on. Once the individual has completed taking the assessment, we feed that information into the computer, and it comes back with answers. And it tells us things such as, based on the way they've answered the questions, that this person is not being honest, this person has a problem in certain areas. It's just an excellent assessment tool. Often when individuals in the program are faced with the results of their assessment instrument, they don't believe it. But about halfway through, maybe 12 to 14 hours into the 20-hour classroom program, they recognize that they do have a problem, and the assessment is very, very accurate. So it's an important part of the curriculum and that they take that assessment instrument. So I mentioned that is $75. Out of that $75, the school owner is required to send $15 to the state to administer us for their expenses. They also send $6 to ADE, which is a company that provides the assessment instrument. And as mentioned earlier, that $6 fee has been set since 1991. And so the assessment provider would like to see an increase in the fee. At the present time, the assessment provider, if he increases the fee or they increase the fee, it will come directly out of the income of the school owner. So we support the fee going up to $82 as DHR has requested. However, we would like to see it go up to $85, and that extra $2 or $3 actually go to ADE, which is the assessment provider. With respect to the fee itself for the course, it is set by law at $190. And if you look at the information that has been provided by Mr. Dunbar of DHR, you will see that the state of Georgia is very low with respect to the fee. Our fee is at $190. South Carolina, who uses the same curriculum, their fee is $425. Even Alabama, that hasn't had an increase since 1988, their fee is $265. So the surrounding states are certainly much higher in the fees that they charge. So we are requesting that the $190 fee be increased to $215 and set in the code section. Other than that, I think that explains our position. If anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Representative Setzler.
I'll wait, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask a question in a moment.
Chairman Knox.
With respect to the fee amount that the schools charge, if we set the fee, doesn't that sort of put the kibosh on anybody that's not in business already to be able to come in and get into the business? whoever the school is there probably has been established 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, whatever it is. Be hard. Basically, when you want to get business, you've got to come in and be able to buy under whoever is doing it in order to break into the marketplace. Or you're going to be either you've got to have a lot of capital to be able to stay in business till you can get a fair share of the market.
That's correct, Representative. In fact, one of the reasons that the fee is set by law, at a time when the fee was not set by law, especially in the rural areas, you would have a school that was open and providing a service and basically not making any money. It would be maybe a couple, and maybe the husband or the wife taught the class, and one of them was had the office open during the week, and they made a small profit and perhaps got paid for their time. And then another school would open up, and without a fee being set in the law, the next thing that would happen, a price war would break out. And then you would have areas throughout the state where someone would live in a small or a rural county, and both schools would go out of business, and then the citizens of that county would have to drive 65 or 75 miles to another county, to another school, so that they could take their mandatory program. So that was one of the reasons why the fees were set in law. As they're set now, most school owners really can't turn a profit with that fee. If it goes up to $215, they can make a profit, because the expenses that school owners have, regardless of whether it's a large school or a small school, are about the same.
But my point is that if you set it at that's what they can make a profit at, then you're only one school's going to be able to make a profit at that. Not two schools are going to be able to make a profit at that. Or to be able to make a profit, you got to do it better, produce it for less, and so on and so forth, which is called capitalism. Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
And so the point would be that if I've got if I'm and I always hear this argument about everything we do in the legislature. Oh, rural charge, you can't afford it. And what I'm saying is that it may be that if you live in an area where it's where the population is not so dense, you have to drive farther for everything. That's one of the benefits of. It's one of the drawbacks for being able to live in an area that's not so populated, is that you have some inconvenience. Just like here, we have some things that we have to, do that we don't like to do because we get the benefit of living in the metro area. So I'm not sure that's a good argument for saying, that we ought to tell people a school. In principle, it makes no sense to say we can decide better how much it costs to produce this than the person can who's actually doing it, and that we don't really care what that is. We're just going to set a number that that we like, and then they get to decide whether or not they want to do it for that, whether they can actually make a living at it or not. So that's why I don't know whether that's a good criteria to say, well, a school can go out of business because they can't make enough money. Well, if they can't, they should go out of business. And I don't know that I can change that by forcing them to charge X dollars. I could charge $190. I could say it's $192. Yes. If they still only get 2 people a year, it's not really a good business for them,
Yeah, I agree with you. As I mentioned, I'm a free market person, but in the past, the policy of the General Assembly has been what I explained. I'm not saying that that's my personal policy, but that's basically what passed out of these committees.
Well, would there be a problem with changing this now? Because this is not a state fee. This is what the person pays to the business that provides the service. When you're talking about we set fees for license renewals and that sort of thing, yeah, we do, but that's because that's a state fee. That gets paid to the state for doing it. That's not a private business doing that, and we just use taxpayers' money to make up the difference if there is one. So is there a reason for us having this fee stuck in here now while we have the opportunity when we're looking at this bill? Is there a reason not to take it out? Do you think that everybody's going to start charging $1,000 for this program?
No, I don't think so. I think what will happen is everybody will start charging $100, and there'll be a price war, and then schools will go out of business, and areas won't be serviced. Now, personally, I don't have a problem with it because we do very, very little business, Taggart Driving School. However, there are other school owners. That's why I don't want to speak for them. I'm just telling you my personal opinion. I would not have a problem with it. But I'm sure that 90% of the school owners out there would have a problem with it. So I don't want to speak for them because that idea has not been run by them.
Okay, so but you're making my point, I think, by saying setting this fee is a way of keeping businesses operating that can't operate at a lesser fee. That they don't know how to do it profitably unless we set a fee that we're forcing people to pay them enough money for them to stay in business, whether they're being profitable or not.
I agree with you, sir.
Any other questions, Chairman Knox?
That's all I have.
Representative Benefield?
No, I have my question.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Barry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I don't disagree with Chairman Knox going here, but I do have a question. I think wouldn't be one of the reasons you wouldn't have a problem with this is you would be one of the companies that could survive, so you would gain more business?
That's correct, sir. That's why I answer as a personal school owner, not as a representative of the other school owners.
Thank you, sir. Les Hammonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Les Hammond of the Department of Driver Services. We're here to support the bill and answer any questions that we can about the way the fees are developed and how they're shared. Particularly the $82 fee is the one that the DHR wants to change, and we're in support of that. The book fee is currently paid is $15, as was stated previously, and that's done through regulation, and we can certainly change that through regulation to fix that part of it, so that they can get an increase after all these years. The other fee that Chairman Knox is talking about, we're not involved in any of that. That's statutory, but I've got my financial people here if anybody wants to ask any questions.
We do get a couple questions. Representative Abrams.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Consistent with Mr. Setzler and Chairman Knox, I'd like to remove the need for this body to have to consider this every year or every few years. And so one of the language changes we were looking at was giving the ability to the department to set a reasonable fee. Contrary to Chairman Knox, I am concerned about the ability to have a captive audience that has a court-mandated obligation, but you have a school that can charge a fee that I think may far exceed the fees that are charged by other schools. And so I do believe that there should be some cap set on, or at least some regulatory scheme. And so could you respond to the proposal as a theoretical matter until such time as we can make a motion, that you would set a minimum fee for you all for this year of the $82 and the $198 intervention fee, but then give to the department the ability to set a reasonable fee as it sees fit going forward? Would that be putting too much responsibility or giving too much power to DDS or to DHR? Can you speak to sort of how you would see this?
Let me introduce Kathy Malone, our Chief Financial Officer, and I'm going to let her try and respond to that because the money's involved in the way it works.
Okay. With that, I don't believe that there would be the schools would still have to show improvement to us that the fee should be increased at that point in time. And with that, the meetings are always open to the general public, and comment it can be received. The main thing on the assessment fee is that the $22 that's on the back page is the difference between the 7 that was raising from 75 to the 82, and that's strictly to administratively support the programs by DDS and DHR.
Okay.
Representative Knox.
The fees, all these fees that are generated from this activity, they go back to the general fund, I guess, don't they? No. Where do they go?
The assessment fee, which is on the back of the bill in line 44, a portion of it is used by DDS to support the regulatory compliance program of DUI, where they go out and audit the schools to make sure that they are providing the assessments and teaching the classroom and things like that.
Is that a dedicated fee?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
It's strictly through an MOU between DHR and DDS at what can support both programs budgetarily to perform their duties.
What about the $82 on 20? Who gets that?
Only a portion of the $22 portion would come to the state, which is what supports the program, and the remaining 60 dollars goes to the school.
I'm sorry, I was reading this code section.
The difference in the 82 stays with the school.
No, if the assessment fee goes from $75 to $82, we collect that extra $7 from the client. That extra $7 will be added on to the present $15
Right.
we pay the state, and we will now send in $22. So it's a wash as far as the school owner is concerned.
But what's the
We're
other
gonna-
portion for?
The other portion of the $75, $6 goes to ADE,
Right.
and then the rest of it is for overhead and expenses for the school to operate.
Okay.
So that's your question, Mr. Chairman.
So is that like a state subsidy to the school then that we're paying for operating expenses and so on? Why wouldn't that just be part of your fee that you charge? Whoever, I mean, she asked you and you answered the question, so I'm asking. I'll just ask you.
It's not a subsidy. It's a fee for a service that we provide. By law, we can charge $75. We provide that service, and we have to pay for that service to ADE. We have to pay for the assessment instrument for every person who takes that assessment. We also have to pay $15 at present to the state for the privilege of them monitoring our programs. And then what is left after you subtract from 75, 6, and 15 goes to the expenses for operating the school. Heat, light, electricity, the person who administers the assessment.
Okay, well, I understand that, but my point is that if you're a business,
Yes.
why is the state giving you money for a cost of your business?
They're not. The client pays the fee. All the fees are paid by the client.
Okay, so they're paying you a fee for your overhead costs and expenses, and then they're paying you $190 on top of that.
They pay us $75 for the assessment, and all the expenses come out of that. And then they come back and take a 20-hour class.
I understand.
Take the 20-hour class, they pay us $190 plus the book fee, which is not set by code of $15.
Okay, so they may come and take the assessment, do the assessment, and then not come back for the class, the course. Is that it? Okay.
Just continue to drive.
All right. So it's not. This is just a fee. There's no real. I mean, I understand that you have a calculation for what your costs are, but it's not really related to this fee. The fee is just another fee. A fee is a fee is a fee, I guess. So really, the cost of this deal is the 190 plus 82 if somebody goes to the school after they take the assessment. Correct? Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Representative Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask this to the representative from the driving schools, and this is going to put you in a ticklish spot, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Do you see value in the legislature setting this, or do you see value in the department having flexibility to set it?
For my decision for the overall good of the program, good public policy, I would set the fee in law.
In law. Thank you.
Is that you? Representative Levitas.
Mr. Chairman, as always, I appreciate the debate we're having here. I just want to be mindful of the fact that it's 9:48, and if there's amendments to be offered, I would just request that we go ahead and offer them, because if we don't move this bill, we're going to have to come up with $500,000 somewhere else to fund this. So I just would request that if we could expedite debate, that would be in the best interest of the department, and I think us not missing the floor vote.
And I appreciate that. I understand the time issue, but it's always been the policy to make sure everyone is able to speak and ask questions before we move forward. And we got one more speaker, and we'll start moving on that after that. I don't see any other questions, so appreciate it very much. Last speaker is Deborah Nesbitt.
I'm going to be really quick. Deborah Nesbitt with the Judicial Council of Georgia. We don't really have a position on this bill. But I feel certain the judges would want me to caution you about raising the fees because they all are offender paid. And so we've got fines. And I'm sure that they would want to take a look at if the fees were going to be raised. Also, these offenders are customers who really want no service. And so if you take the cap off and let it be a competitive price, you run the risk of there being providers who are offering a subpar service, and those offenders would go to the subpar provider because that would be easier. So with that, if nobody has any questions.
You got one. Representative Knox.
I mean, aren't we talking about two different things? One is whether or not the government's going to set prices for people to provide this. And the second thing is you're saying, well, if they're able to charge a lesser fee than we're going to order them to do in this law, then they're going to do it. They're going to provide a lesser service or a substandard service,
They might,
right?
and I'm not
okay,
saying
they
that
might.
everybody would.
Okay, I understand. But the point is, isn't that is our responsibility to be sure that we police it and that we enforce it according to the regulations. Otherwise, we don't need these regulations.
Correct.
We might as well
That's
forget
correct.
that.
That's correct.
So do you still think that's a good argument that the reason we ought to charge this is because if we don't, then some schools might not do it right?
Well, I mean, it's just based on experience. I mean, and they do shop around, and it's not just with this program. It's with treatment programs that they're court ordered to. It's the same kind of situation. Sometimes they do shop around and they look.
Well, I understand, and we ought to get on those schools,
Right.
and we ought to put them out of business, put a couple of people in jail, because that's an enforcement issue, and if we have the laws, then we ought to
Right.
enforce them, and we're not doing that. And I know there's schools out there that do that. I know my experience tells me that, too. But I think that's a different issue than whether we're going to set prices that will determine competition. I don't think we ought to be doing that.
And again, I think that the judges would not want the fees to go up. I mean, I think they would support the reason why they need this fee increase to regulate the programs. They had no position on this bill. I don't think they'd have a problem with that. But if you go up on the class fee a lot or you let it be set by rule, that's something I think they would be interested in, because a lot of these folks are having a hard time paying their fines and doing what they have to do right now.
So it's always expensive to get a DUI in the
Correct,
first place.
it
It'd be
is.
a lot cheaper to call a cab, all said and
Yes,
done.
it
So,
would.
so
I agree with you.
the expense issue doesn't bother me a bit.
So if there are no other questions, that's all I want.
You have one more.
Oh.
Representative Setzler.
Mr. Chairman, I know to expedite things, I just wanted to say I'd like to be recognized to make a motion and offer an amendment.
Thank you, ma'am. I was about to. Representative Ramsey, I believe you had a motion quite some time ago. We have a motion to pass. Do we have a second? Here we got a motion and a second. I know we have some amendments. Representative Abrams. Okay, let's see here. Representative Setzler.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer an amendment that, in essence, sets the fees that are provided in this bill as not less thans, and then offer some language at the end that would, in essence, allow the Department of Driver Services to set the rates moving forward. I am sensitive to putting it in statute. I think there's some certainty there, but I don't think the legislature needs to be dealing with this every 3 or 4 years. So, to that end, I would offer the following amendment, Mr. Chairman. On line 19, after shall charge a fee of, I would insert the words not less than, so that it would read on 19 and 20, shall charge a fee of not less than $82. And then continuing along line 20, where it reads for the assessment component, I would insert of not less than $200 for the intervention component. I would make it $200. And on page 2, I would offer also on line 44, just before $22, I would offer not less than $22. And at the direction of Legislative Council, or subject to Legislative Council's thoughts as to placement, I would offer at the end of line 49, effective 6/30/2010, which is not this year but next year, all fees specified in the subsection shall be set by the Department of Driver Services. So that in essence what we're doing is we're setting not less thans in the numbers provided, 82, 200, and 22, and then effective next year all fees can be picked up and managed by Department of Driver Services. I'm sensitive to market conditions. I do think there's, in a regulated industry myself, in environmental work and engineering, we take classes all the time. I think it's very easy to, quote, meet a standard of care so that you can defend yourself in court and still offer a substandard product in terms of professional training. I see that. I live that. I think a race to the bottom would be dangerous here and not beneficial overall. I'm sensitive to price controls, but I think this is the best approach. Would ask the committee to vote with me on the amendment.
Jill, you got all that?
Again, I said effective, and again, Jill, if you would offer some better words, I'd certainly be open to that. Effective 6/30/2010, all fees specified in the subsection shall be set by the Department of Driver Services. Thank you. Again, Mr. Chairman, I'd like the Department of Driver Services just to set these if we could.
Okay.
Do we need language in there saying, exempting, saying it's subject to the minimums the department shall set? Because otherwise it would seem to me that'd be a conflict.
I just want to make sure Jill's ready because I think we're about to have a substitute motion. Okay.
Actually,
Abrams.
thank you. I think Representative Levitas brought a very simple problem to the attention of this body and brought a very straightforward and simple solution. And while I'm very sympathetic to the concerns raised by Chairman Knox and by Mr. Setzler, I think that this bill on its face solves a very narrow problem, and I'm concerned about making regulatory changes to fee structures on the fly without having adequate testimony from the affected parties, and I would just urge this body to vote down that amendment.
Representative Collins.
On this same issue, and again, would work with Representative Knox and Representative Setz on a simple bill. This bill right here, to late time, late out, I would just urge this body to vote no on any amendments at this time and just get this out, work on it on a different time.
Mr. Chairman, if that's not a friendly amendment, I will withdraw the amendment I offered on this from.
Sounds like it's becoming unfriendly as we go. So if you have that option, if you like to withdraw that amendment, we move forward on the Ramsey motion, and the second we can do that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the author, would he take that as a friendly amendment?
Representative Abrams made a good point. It's now 9:57. I just would prefer that we pass this bill out, and then I'll work with you over the summer, and DDS and DHR and the school operators, we can all work offline. But this is a fix we have to get done, or come up with $500,000 extra dollars.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments on this bill?
Chairman, I withdraw the amendment.
Hold on just one second. We'll grab Stephanie and says suspending the rules. We're about to be. There we are. Okay, those all in favor of the, we got a motion and a second. There's no amendments on this bill whatsoever, so now we're just back to House Bill.
Yeah, you actually have to pass it by sub because you don't have the underscoring on line 13 and 42.
By committee sub? Okay. All those in favor of passing House Bill 454 by committee sub, just say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Bill passed. Thank you very much.